Today's selection on this First Responder Sunday is the first letter of Peter, chapter 4, verses 8 through 11. Above all, maintain constant love for one another, for love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaining. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gifts each of you has received. Whoever speaks must do so as one speaking the very words of God. Whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies, so that God may be glorified in all things through Jesus Christ. To him belong the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. When I was a kid, my favorite book about an animal that helps fight fires was The Fire Cat. I recently went looking for it, but instead I found one called Rhinos Who Rescue. Why rhinos, I wondered. As I mentioned the book later on to a friend, I remembered an old South African movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy. It has a convoluted plot, but I remembered one of the running jokes. Every night, when the protagonists sat around a fire in the Kalahari, they would get distracted, and a rhino would run into the camp, stamp out the fire, and run back out. The narrator stated that the rhino is the desert's firefighter. Now it makes sense. The first letter of Peter is from Peter in Rome, addressed to the Christians in the area of Asia Minor. Paul's ministry there was during the 60s, and the author refers to Rome as Babylon, which Judeo-Christians don't do until after the Romans destroyed the temple in the 70s. On the other hand, there is no sense of the intense persecution and martyrdoms that started in the 90s, so this letter was probably written between those two times. Now, the purpose of this letter was to fortify the Gentile converts to Christianity, who were being rejected by their friends and families. Now, Greco-Roman culture was hierarchical and suspicious of new foreign religions, believing that they would cause immorality and insubordination in the household, sedition against the state, and cause women and slaves to misbehave. To counter this, Peter emphasizes that we should imitate Christ by doing good and not retaliating against those who slander their congregations. The chapter the selection comes from starts and ends with the reminder that Jesus suffered, so they should be able to withstand a bit of suffering. And Peter also reminds them to stand strong in the face of temptations, and they will be rewarded. Now, today's verses are about how we should be in our community. Love one another. Be hospitable. Serve others. Use your God-given gifts and be strong. God gives us gifts, all of us. We have to find them, open them, and we must use them. And we do so with all of our strength, with God's help. It was not until I gained any personal experiences of firefighting to try to illustrate this selection. I remember wanting to be one back in middle school. So at a Boy Scout event at the Torrington Armory, where the Torrington firefighters were allowing kids to try on their gear, I jumped at the chance. When I tried on the mask, I had a little panic attack. I knew then that God did not gift me with what was needed to be a professional firefighter. And it wasn't until a Tuesday at search and rescue training with the Colebrook Fire Department did I successfully put on a mask and use it. And before joining the volunteers, the closest I'd ever been to firefighting was through my gift of photography. And one of these photos that I had taken was on a winter night in Worcester. A nearby triple-decker house was on fire, and I watched two firefighters on the roof cutting holes, and they were backlit by smoke that reflected light from the fire on the other side of the house. The people around me and I, we marveled at how those guys moved around. It did not look safe, but they did what they had to do using their gifts and their strength. As I continued through scouting, I discovered that God had gifted me with a near photographic memory and an ability to teach. So I used those gifts as a troop guide, teaching new scouts many skills, including first aid. And as an adult, I taught first aid and emergency preparedness, merit badges at Camp Workomen. I told my classes that if they did well on the test, then they could use their last day to do a simulated search and rescue in the woods. Now, I remember one week, the commissioner, who I've known since I was a kid, we'd grown up at the same troop, he sent me the largest CIT to be their victim. Apparently, he was being punished. And I was partnered with a scouter from the Czech Republic. I told him to hide the victim, and I gave him some ketchup packets. He insisted on also bringing mustard, mayonnaise, and peanut butter from the mess hall as well. See, he wanted to use his gifts to make the wounds look as realistic as possible. All right, now you need to understand, this CIT was twice the size of any of my students. Now, and my students, they had all the right equipment and training, but the spars broke, the blankets ripped, and the victim was dropped down a gorge twice. It was their first time, but they had that drive to serve others, and they would get more practice and grow bigger and stronger over time. No matter how you are gifted and how much you prepare, putting your gifts into practice in real life is quite a different thing. Serving as a hospital chaplain, I watched the speed and efficiency of the medics and the flight paramedics in the emergency department, seeing how they use their gifts to help save lives. The last time I used those gifts, I discovered and practiced in Scouts was on my way home from working a shift at Barnes & Noble many years ago. I was heading west on 202 past the Neepog Reservoir. My coworkers and I and other mall employees were moments behind an accident. It was a foggy night after an electrical storm where a bunch of horses had been spooked and jumped their paddock. One of the girls from Old Navy had glanced off of a paint, and an eastbound SUV collided with a Morgan. Now, there were three of us from B&N right behind them. One of them, he just turned and drove off. Not a surprise if you knew that guy. Now, the other guy, Bubba, and I, we decided to go see if we can help. It was a bit chaotic. Half a dozen people were in hysterics, and one guy was bleeding from the head. Now, Bubba turned to me and asked if I knew first aid, because he didn't. I went and got my first aid kit and handled the bleeding man, while Bubba calmed everyone else. See, Bubba, he has a gift of calm, and he somehow has a calming effect on people. Soon enough, a paramedic arrived and took over, and then I noticed that the paint was up in a snowdrift. I figured that it would not be good if he ran off again, so Bubba and I, we stared at him. And then Bubba bravely decided to stay and talk to the girls some more, so I climbed up the drift. And I remembered something I heard my stepfather say about horses, so I was able to keep him from running off until his owner arrived. Now, both Bubba and I, we had gifts that were useful in that situation, though they were different gifts, and we use them to help serve others. We all have gifts given to us by God, and we shouldn't squander them. We must use them in serving and in loving our neighbors. All kinds of first responders use their gifts on every call, serving our community, ready at a moment's notice, and risking their own safety in the process. Thank you for using your gifts. Please join me in the spirit of prayer. O God, your love for us leads us along the way. May we have the ears to hear the cries of this world, responding with our gifts to enact your hope. Fill us with your love so that we may respond to all the needs around us, and help us to care with your heart. Amen.